now is the chairman of the Senate's Select Committee on Intelligence, Senator Richard Burr of the great state of North Carolina. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. So the administration is obviously considering becoming even more engaged in what's going on in Syria and Iraq, the fight against ISIS. Whether that means more airstrikes or more ground raids remains to be seen, I suppose. What do you think the U.S. needs to be doing?
Well, Jake, they need a strategy change because the strategy has not worked in Syria, and it's questionable as to whether it's been very effective in Iraq. The reality is that we've got over 240,000 civilians that have been killed, 4 million people displaced. I would have hoped that we would have had a no-fly zone 3 years ago. We don't. We've got to begin to address how we contain ISIL and eliminate ISIL, working with our Gulf state partners. It's going to be tough to believe that we can go into Syria and work with the Russians and the Iranians, which is the coalition that's been put together to prop up Assad, and everybody else in the region's strategy is to get rid of Assad.
So you think that we need to be offering a counterforce to the Russia-Iranian-Assad alignment?
I think what we need to do is provide leadership in the region as to how we're going to address not only ISIL on one side of Syria, but Assad on the other side.
Do you think both should be targets for the
United States? I think both have to be targets until that's no longer the stated policy of the United States. But up till now, Assad's removal has been an absolute by this administration, and many of our partners in the region believe that that's the case as well.
Well, what happens then if Russia is backing Assad as they are, and the U.S. gets involved in the war even more? We know that Russia is targeting some of these rebel groups that the United States supports. Is this not inevitably going to become a proxy, if not an actual military confrontation between the United States and Russia?
Well, I don't want to guess 3 steps out as to where we're going to be, but the inability to deconflict today presents a real problem between either opposition forces in country that might target Russian aircraft or Russian individuals and the United States and what can happen in a combat zone. But we can never lose the perspective of the fact that this probably requires a political settlement on the Assad side, but you can't have a political settlement on the ISIL side. So maybe a dual strategy or dual policy, but right now we only have one in Syria.
I want to turn to cybersecurity, which is obviously a huge concern. You're offering a cyber defense bill. You co-sponsored it. The Senate's debating it, and it would encourage private businesses to more readily share information with each other and with the government. Why aren't they providing that information now already?
Because of liability potential. They could have shareholder lawsuits because the transfer of data, not necessarily personal data, but data to the U.S. government. So we provide liability coverage when that transmission is met. We allow antitrust protection when they talk to their competitors. And we also, for the first time, empower by statute the federal government to push back to that business and out to business generally what type of attacks taking place, what tools being used, and more importantly, what mechanism, what software can you put on your computer or your system to defeat that attack tool. This is truly an effort to try to minimize data loss.
Senator Richard Burr of North Carolina, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you.